This episode of The Watch is brought to you by Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate has been searching the globe for flavors that pair perfectly with coffee. So when they heard the new season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus, was set in Thailand, they were inspired to brew up 2 new flavored creamers, Thai iced coffee and pina colada flavored creamers. They're available for a short time only, so for the love of coffee, go try them now.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com. And joining me on the other line, you know he will go to Muay Thai tonight. It's Andy Greenwald!
Chris, have you ever been to any kind of like large-scale public fighting? I mean, we're from Philadelphia, so yes, we have. But I mean like in an organized, ticketed way.
I've seen one time, what was Ice-T? Oh, I had to do door at a body count show in Boston a long time ago.
Disappoint.
And there was a mass like fight there. But other than that, I cannot say that I imbibe in combat sports that much. Like, and I love some meathead shit, but I just don't really go to the fights. But it seemed like Carrie Coon enjoyed herself. It seemed like Guy Talk did not. We're obviously talking about the 7th episode of White Lotus, just taking its sweet little time, getting to the season finale. We're going to talk about White Lotus. We're going to talk a little bit about MobLand, which is how I've chosen to say it. New show on Paramount Plus with Tom Hardy. We know we had to do it. Greenwald, it's good to see you, man. I'm in Philly. You're in LA. We're doing this virtually, but it's nice to see a friendly face.
It's great to see you. I am, for what it's worth, it's not that I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in Sean Fennessy's movie void.
I call it the content cave, yeah.
This is my first time recording in this completely sealed black box Faraday cage of takes. And I also think, I don't know if you...
I see a twinkle in your eye. I could see you kind of getting into maybe like...
I like
you know, Tales from the Couch with Andy.
I do like doing the direct address, but like ripping up the script like President James Marsden in episode 7 of Paradise. But
let Bartlett also be Bartlett, man. Let's go.
But Chris, I don't know, I don't know if this is picking up on the video, but it's not completely empty. There is a Spotify logo here, but there is a plant next to me, which I may be mistaken, but I believe this is the same plant that Tim Ratliff is asking about in these scenes from next week's episode of White Lotus.
That plant is challenging everything we know about photosynthesis.
Yes. I mean, there's no oxygen in here, I'll tell you that.
That plant has been sitting next to Sean as he builds syllabuses.
This plant breathes cinema. Before we get into everything, Chris, I know you want to do housekeeping, but I also want to hear about your time in Boston with the gang.
Yeah. So I'm on the East Coast because the Rewatchables gang did a Boston, almost like a little residency. We did a show last Thursday, me, Bill, Rosillo, and Sean did Good Will Hunting at the House of Blues there, right by Fenway Park. And then Bill, Sean, and I hosted like a mini film festival over at the Coolidge Corner Theater. It was awesome. I used to live down the street from that movie theater back in the 90s. So to be back there was pretty surreal. And we came out and spoke before or after a bunch of movies like The Town. The Verdict was honestly the highlight for me, just to see that on a big screen. Heat, obviously. The Heads came out. We were there until 1:30 in the morning because Heat started at 10.
That's too late for Heat. Wow. Did it reveal anything?
I think actually Heat started at like 10:30, but it was, I feel like we were out really late. Yeah, and then there were some more films on Sunday, Departed, Spotlight, and Eddie Coyle. Chris, I came down to Philly, though, and yeah.
What do those movies have in common? I'm having trouble sensing a theme.
They were movies that Bill likes. They are movies that I like. They are Boston movies or heist movies.
I see. Great.
Yeah, so.
And now you're down in Philly, and the weather's turned because it was very cold in Boston.
Yeah, it's really nice out. I've been, East Coast is the best. East Coast at spring is the best. Been walking around listening to Def Heaven, just like feeling 19, you know?
Are you bullish for Christopher Sanchez's home debut today?
It's against the Rockies, right?
I think
I'll take a piece of that. Yeah.
You just called my bluff. I'm not ready for baseball yet, so I'm not really aware.
I had an experience last night. Sports fans of this podcast, of which there were probably 3, will enjoy this. I went to Bad Brother, obviously, the first night back in town, and they had the Sixers up, and just me and CJ, who works there, just staring at the TV, hoping for a big 20-point loss.
Wait.
like it was 2010 again, or
Can
whatever.
we jump in? Can I jump in on this for a second? Because I was also in Philadelphia recently for some family stuff, and I went to no, all respect to Bad Brother, but I went to another.
It's okay to mention another Philadelphia.
I went to another BB. I went to the classic Bob and Barbara is one of the GOAT bars in the world, and got there on the early side, and they had right before the band started playing, and they had the Sixers game on the screen.
Was Deaf Heaven playing at Bob and Barbara's?
It could have been Deaf Heaven. Does Deaf Heaven feature the organ stylings of a 70-year-old woman named Pat? If so, I saw them and I loved them. The Sixers were on, and I thought, because I spend way too much time paying attention to Philadelphia sports and sports psychosis, that everyone got the memo that they need to lose every game that they play. But
we have to fail for flag,
One guy didn't get the memo. One guy was next to me. He was drinking Jack on the Rocks, and he was cheering every hustle play.
You know what? Shout out to that guy. Man.
That guy was like,
be him.
I want my team to win. But he was rooting for the Tankapalooza Sixers. He was just like every Quentin Grimes bucket.
My Buddhist monk would be that guy, drinking Jack on the Rocks and just cheering for W's. That's all I want to be.
It's true. It's a simpler life.
Yeah, a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, you can email us at thewatch@spotify.com. You can follow us on Instagram at thewatchpod_. You can watch us on Spotify, where you're listening to this podcast, hopefully. And you can also watch us on the Ringer-TV channel of YouTube, a big platform for video, I've been told.
Listen, I've got young children. It's the only platform.
Andy, there was a little bit of news here and there that I wanted to discuss with you because we haven't really chatted. We recorded early last week, if our memory serves.
Mm-hmm.
So
we
missed the Avengers cast rollout, which was essentially like, were you ever in a Marvel movie at Fox and or Disney?
Wait, are you saying that the cast reveal video was kind of like the 90-page arbitration agreements you get mailed sometimes being like, have you ever heard of AT&T? If so, you might be entitled to 60 cents.
Did you stay at Camp Lejeune between 1984 and 1986 and or have you drunk from the Wissahickon? Then you could be in...
You may be worthy to lift Thor's hammer. Casting of Thor TBD.
So there's that. There's some musical chairs at Amazon, which I thought was pretty interesting. Jennifer Salke out as a... is that how you pronounce her last name? I've never asked her in person.
No, that is how you pronounce it. I can't believe it's never come up, but that's because you clearly just call her Jen.
Yeah, and we're just talking about Deaf Heaven most of the time.
Cool.
And Lonely People with Power. Cop that album. It's really good. It's like my favorite piece of music.
Lonely People with Power, the Jennifer Salke's production golden parachute deal at Amazon explained.
So where do you want to start? You want to talk about Avengers? You want to talk about Amazon? Is there anything else you want to chat about?
Well, I'm super psyched to talk White Lotus, but I do think we should do news, particularly because let's start with the Avengers stuff, because the streets have waited too long to hear you cook on this. Chris, you were busy last week. You were in Boston. You were pressing the flesh. You were just seeing the people, man of the streets. And you, even on days when you're dialed in, you're not usually that reactionary when it comes to big IP studio stuff. But this one bugged you a little bit. I feel like you didn't love it.
No, I mean, I think it's probably goes in tandem with the discussion that's been happening about the Russos for the last couple of weeks because of Electric State, and they're now returning to Marvel. These two news stories that Andy and I were talking about, the Amazon shakeup and the Avengers rollout, kind of are united by the Russos in the sense that the Russos made maybe the signature failure of the previous Amazon administration, which is Citadel, an attempt at like basically bootstrapping an entire a global spy franchise from ground up and making it into like, you could have international franchises of this main spy show that we could do in all these different languages all over the globe. And it failed pretty spectacularly, and it cost a lot of money. I think, but those are pretty unobjected to facts. And the Russos are returning to Doomsday, and everybody was like, "Well, this is just the safe pair of hands are back. We're gonna make this.
Yep.
We're gonna make this the right way." And Downey's back, and all this other stuff. And it's not that like I think actually like anybody who's like conversant in comic book stuff knows what's coming, which is kind of maybe a different place I find myself now than I did for Infinity War and Endgame, where I was actually like somewhat surprised by the snap and some of the stuff that happened in those movies. And I think obviously those two films featured this moment where the majority of characters in the current MCU, or that point the MCU, came together to fight this evil villain. And that was not necessarily broadcast ahead of time, or if it was, I wasn't reading those message boards. You could conclude that was going to happen, but
what were you doing? Travel baseball? What were you up to?
I was at Bob and Barbara's cheering for a big W over the Raptors.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, like there was just something. Okay, I'm gonna make a kind of long circuitous analogy here.
I can't wait. I've got a fire analogy. I was just
reading about a TV show that I don't watch called Bosch, which is also on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading an interview with a supporting character, an actor on that show. I think his name is Troy Evans, where he was talking about the transition from Bosch to Bosch Legacy, which is the new version of Bosch on Amazon.
On Freeform.
Well, it's on Freevee, and it also is
right.
It's ending. It's ending this season.
Yes.
And he was basically like, we could have just kept doing Bosch, but they wanted to get rid of all the people who had been working on that show for 7 years because they had basically triggers in their contracts that said if you did this amount of service, you got X amount of dollars. And this is for people below the line, behind the scenes, like union jobs. And he was like, we basically, like, Amazon essentially scrapped the mothership show to start a cheaper version of the show and then abandoned it when whatever metrics told them to.
Yes.
And he was like, we used to shoot like in downtown LA locations. Now it's a lot more on set, stuff like that. And I was thinking about that story and about the way in which a lot of the technology companies that run these studios are looking for efficiencies wherever they can, especially now in 2025 seems to be a big word out there, efficiency. And I was thinking about like the rollout of the major 2 films of the next 5 years that are supposed to maybe save theatrical movie going and revive MCU and help Disney's bottom line. And they came up with director's chairs. Like they were like, the best we can do is a shot of all these people who we probably still had under contract to some extent anyway. And we could do director's chairs. Now I know when they announced Downey, first of all, I'm 47. Who cares? Like, I'm not trying to get like in my feelings about how they announce Avengers movies, but I just noted with interest that their version of a huge, big fireworks rollout for this cast was names on the back of canvas chairs.
Oh, also spread out over hours, right? They were doing this on YouTube, and it was just lingering over the name of Danny Ramirez as Falcon. Okay, not my Falcon, but you tell me what you want to tell me. But so was there anything about this that like moved any needle for you? Because I guess the big takeaway, there are a couple big takeaways if you are tracking this stuff, which we sadly are.
Wait, do you have any thoughts on what I just said though? Like, do you think that those two things correspond, or do you think I'm like seeing a connection that isn't there?
Yes, I mean, I think it's a tougher comparison to lay directly on top of an Avengers movie, because if Disney's spending money on anything, it's this. This is their bottom line basically for the next 2 years or whenever the second part of this 2-movie series is going to come out. But in terms of, I mean, you can look at it in 2 ways. There is certainly, there's just a lowering of scale and expectation, because director's chairs is super boring and meaningless. And, again, it's not at all about them having an inspired story to tell, although they may well have one. It's purely about just, driving Reddit threads about excitement about who they got cast, or like just stoking the embers of whatever flame remains for the Fox X-Men movies, which is turned to be a much more durable heat-producing source than I ever would have expected. But yeah, I think the thing that struck me, I mean, look, you mentioned Thanos' snap, right? And like one of the incredible things about the Marvel Universe up to that point was that everything was cumulative. Every story built on the bones of on the back of the last story to head towards something. After the snap, which was legitimately, I think, surprising for the majority of the people in the audience, and then the next movie, which I still will cape up for and love, Endgame. Endgame was about going back in time to undo something that happened. And every single Marvel story since the snap has been about going back in time or going in a different dimension and undoing things that had already happened to try to find some residual spark. And there's a version of this movie that may well exist that we, the audience, walk out of and we're just like, man, Florence Pugh is the prince who was promised, and she is the star of this movie. And they were able to do the thing that Kevin Feige proved he could do 15 years ago, which is mint stars.
Yeah.
That would be cool. The best case argument for this movie, I think, is that the Russos and which one? And Stephen McFeely, and I guess Waldron might still be involved to some degree. They have access to the nuclear codes, right? They've seen Thunderbolts. They have seen early cuts of Fantastic Four. So my guess is they are looking at those and being like, here's what pops and here's what we can steer towards. And that there's a version of it that might take advantage of the fresh blood and make a new story. That's best case scenario. The worst case scenario is this is just the absolute nadir of them being like, we can make anything worth your time by animatronically resurrecting portions of your childhood, or in our case, of our mid-30s.
Yeah.
It's not exactly inspiring stuff. And there was, you remember last week when I was like, if I was still writing long content columns on Tuesdays for Grandland, here's what my take would be. I did have another one where it was just like, there was an element of this rollout and maybe the rollout of the next year as this movie goes into production where I'm like, is anybody feeling this a little bit like 2024 DNC vibes? Where it's just like, all your old friends are here. Podcast impresario Barack Obama is here. Hillary Clinton is here, and we all agree Avengers movies are still good. Vote for Avengers movies. Do you know what I mean? Like there was some sense of like, we still like stuff, don't we? Guys?
It'll be interesting to see. A lot of importance is being put on what Superman does at the box office, not only for movies in general, but specifically for this kind of story. And to sort of interrogate whether or not like the comic book superhero genre needs a timeout, and whether or not like the budgets for these movies make it so that they have to be among the most popular movies ever made each time they drop for them to turn a profit. But I think that honestly, Avengers has a lot to do. Superman will say a lot about what the appetite for Avengers is, because Superman, obviously, along with Spider-Man and Batman, is probably the most recognizable name in superhero storytelling. And if that can't get the people going, if that doesn't juice people up to get out to the theater, I kind of wonder whether or not Kelsey Grammer being back is not going to do it either.
You don't think Kelsey Grammer being the key? Kelsey Grammer and 85-year-old Ian McKellen being
very
key
clear.
to...
All of those Fox X-Men people are dying like 5 minutes into this
100%.
movie, right?
Wait, I want to circle back to that. I want to zag and go on the record, because whenever I go on the record with outrageous takes about summer movies, I'm always right. Like with Barbie. And so I want to put my flag down and say, I think Fantastic Four will be critically better received than Superman, and maybe commercially do better than Superman. And I'm pro Superman.
I'm gonna bet against you on the box office. We've been around the Fantastic Four block a couple of times. I think it'll do great, but I think Superman will do better.
Can you name the cast and director off the top of your head of the Fox Fantastic Four movies?
You mean the Trank Fantastic Four movie?
No.
Because I can name that cast.
By the way, it's funny. Josh Trank's getting named later because I did a deep dive in Tom Hardy's last 10 years of filmography, and that is a wild journey, and we'll be talking about that later when we get to MobLand. No, the marginally successful Fantastic Four movies, they made 20 years ago.
Chris Evans.
Yes. Right?
Reese, what was that guy, the Welsh guy's name who plays Reed?
Reese Witherspoon? Matthew Reese Witherspoon.
No, what's his name?
Jan Griffith. I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but
right.
yes. That's right. You got, that's the harder one.
Who is Sue?
I'll give you a hint. She has a skincare line. That narrows it down. Very few actresses from the 21st century have skincare lines.
Yeah, it's true.
But you're the guy that goes to Sephora. So
who is the Sue Storm from that? I can't remember. Who is it? This isn't good podcasting.
I think this is great. Jessica Alba.
Oh, yeah. Right. And then the thing was like Michael Chiklis.
Yes. And can you name Dr. Doom?
No.
Julian McMahon, the star of Nip Tuck, who beat out
Well, it was a different time,
Robert Downey Jr.
You know,
Robert
Did he
Downey
really?
Jr. Yes, what Feige suggested Bob Downey Jr. for Doom then. So full circle moment.
It is a full circle moment.
Anyway, but your point that we've been around the block with Fantastic Four, I think that what people might respond to, and I want Superman to do well because I think it's going to be good. I think what people might respond to with Fantastic Four is the feeling that that trailer gave, which is a little bit of that, oh, Marvel's telling a clever little story. And it's just this clever little story magic that drove people to Guardians of the Galaxy and drove people away from, hey, the president's the Red Hulk. Have you fandangoed yet?
Did you ever see that?
No.
Will you see that? Will you be seeing it before Thunderbolts just to connect the tissue?
Before Thunderbolts, for sure.
Yeah,
I need to know.
thanks.
I need to know the status of the executive branch in the MCU later.
What's the intelligence community facing as we enter the age of the Thunderbolts?
Yeah, look, I think that your point about these X-Men characters, I think this is a swan song on top of whatever the last swan song was, because for people who pay attention to this stuff, that what they're building to in Secret Wars is incursions of alternate dimensions where alternate dimensions get snuffed out one by one, eventually leaving like a combined world for I guess the Stark variant that is doomed to rule over. So yeah, I don't think people are like, wow, can Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen like keep up with the dynamism on screen of Hannah John Kamen? I feel like I don't think they're going to be standing up much. And I know Patrick Stewart doesn't stand up much as Professor X.
Yeah, it's not the NFL Combine. I think those guys are going to.
Do you think like Channing Tatum skipped the Combine?
It's MCU Pro Day. We're going to see if McKellen still has that Twitch ability.
I love McKellen so much.
McKellen's 40 speed. Well, I saw Kelsey Grammer straight Randy Moss to guy out there. Anyway, Amazon thoughts. Excuse me. I wanted to draw a parallel between the way that Jen Psaki's exit from Amazon as it was essentially Amazon MGM. What was she head of? She was the studio chief. Mike Hopkins, who was her boss, is like head of video for Amazon, correct?
Yeah, I mean, and rather than like get in the weeds of the org chart, it's worth noting that Amazon is a very, very org chart heavy place.
Well, and they're flattening it. They're getting rid of management all over the company. So it's I suppose they can use that as sort of a philosophical backing for what they're doing here. But the main point I wanted to make was the fact that this story, as all these Hollywood executive C-suite stories feature, is a lot of like the successes and failures of the people who are leaving or losing their jobs. Currently, there's a lot of speculation about Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi at Warner Brothers, who run their film division and have been under fire because of some big bets they made on movies like Mickey 17 or Joker 2, which was not, I don't think, really their baby, but they definitely had it on their ledger. They have Sinners coming up, and then One Battle After Another, the PTA movie whose trailer just came out, and you may now please just go ham on it.
No, that's the other thing we missed. Like I do wish we could have recorded last week.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, this is honestly the reason to live. Like
that trailer gave me a jolt of life, a thunderbolt, if you will, but without an asterisk. It's such a sick trailer. Yeah. And it made me so excited that in the year, this cursed year of our Lord 2025, PTA is back with funny art about revolutionaries. It was so exciting, but it also felt like, I mean, I know like the headlines, right, are like, oh, they spent $140 million and they're already hedging their bets and they're already concerned about it. And it's the biggest budget he's ever had and whatever. And I do not care. It's not my money. But like, it did feel, and no one movie should carry the hopes and dreams of everyone, although I am in Sean's echo chamber of deep ideas. And so maybe I'm huffing some of those right now. This trailer to me felt like the best case, like super team, if you will, of classic PTA, certainly. But there were elements of it that felt a little QT, and there were elements of it that felt a little Wessy. Like that last sequence.
A little WA?
There's a little bit at the end with DiCaprio and Benicio where they're doing
Picking up some sense of French Dispatch from that?
Well, there's a little when he does the revolution thing,
Yeah.
which is also what the wolf does at the end of Fantastic Mr. Fox. And then that's animated. You probably never saw it. And then and then the carpet rolls over him. I mean, it's just movies and the only guys who get to make movies, and it felt like it's in a conversation with other things, but a little bit in conversation with whatever artistic electricity still exists in the world. And as I hear myself, I'm like, I'm putting too much on this movie, but what else do we have?
Well, what else do we have? I mean, so anyway, my point was basically like, the analysis of the successes and failures of these executives on the Warner Brothers side. We're talking about millions. This is a little bit of like a simple way of putting it, but I kind of buy it. On the Warner Brothers side, we're talking about millions, and on the Amazon side, we're talking about billions. And it struck me just how much you're allowed to lose at Amazon, or maybe even like just the numbers that they can play with that even a company as huge as Warner Brothers Discovery can't hit.
Totally.
And Jen Psaki was overseeing a $9 billion content budget and was able to have failures like The Peripheral and the aforementioned Citadel,
or failures, not certainly of investment, but of return on investment in creative relationships, which it's technically her job to manage, like the Phoebe Waller-Bridge, trust fund, basically, which may eventually result in a Tomb Raider show, but has thus far not.
And some of the reporting suggests that they've had like multiple writers' room have not produced a script for Tomb Raider, which is honestly sad just because I want more Phoebe Waller-Bridge stuff. And, she obviously worked a little bit on Mr. and Mrs. Smith and then left that project. But in any case, I was struck by this very scary thought, which was you could convince me, or I may be convinced that Amazon and Netflix are capable of just waiting out all these other studios until there's nobody left. And that essentially that might be the overarching philosophy. Because I often ask myself, like, what the hell is Amazon doing making this stuff anyway? I mean, what if you want to go to space and sell paper towels, like, do you really need to make Reacher? And I do think that you could convince me that they can just wait out and outspend and basically take hits for the years until there's this massive contraction in the studio business in Hollywood, and then there's really just a couple of technology-based companies left that can actually make stuff.
Not to go back to circle the same existentially pessimistic drain that we often find ourselves circling these days, but yes, there is no fundamental risk for Amazon, Apple, and Netflix in their endeavors. Netflix maybe a little bit more, but at this point, I think it's hard to make the case that they're really actually in trouble. Part of if you look at any company, even companies that we don't really have a lot of sympathy for necessarily, just like on a human level, I mean, these are giant corporations. Even for Disney, for example, to greenlight something, there is some element of risk to shareholder value, to the bottom line. Outside of Jen Psaki making too many bad deals and it costing her job, and by the way, costing her the title and the prestige, but she's getting a golden parachute production deal with a first look at Amazon for whatever else she does next, there is actually no risk for any of this, which you see sometimes in the work, right? Like you kind of, and it's not easy to paint that with a broad brush because it's not going to be in any of the headlines because it was neither an enormous success or enormous catastrophe. But Donald Glover's deal at Amazon made Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is, I think, an excellent show, one of the best shows of last year, Emmy nominated, coming back. It also netted out Swarm, which was critically acclaimed. So there are some things that still sneak through the algorithm and exist. But otherwise, what are they doing with all of that enormous money and privilege other than lighting on fire with the Citadel universe? Or not betting most of it because they have limitless money, but betting a ton of it on Bond. I mean, it's not exactly inspiring stuff to think about. To your point about, and then the next question I think that I was asking that other people might be wondering is like, is this going to change?
Yeah, right.
The behavior, or at least the commercial output of one of the largest spenders in the industry? And I feel like the answer that I've gotten back is not really. Amazon's most sort of solid lunch pail success have been this sort of like kind of Sheridan-esque, slightly red
Bellamy's
tinged
like called them the guy with the gun shows. Reacher, Jack Ryan, Bosch. Yeah.
Terminalist. Like these shows are very successful for them. I believe all of them predate Jen Salke taking the big job. So they are not things that she could hang her hat on necessarily. And that will go on. Will this affect the big spends that didn't get the return on investment like Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings or Citadel? I don't know. I mean, now they're just going to pour a lot of that money into making a Bond universe, right? So, and I think regardless of the org chart stuff, the impression that Amazon gives for, in this town is that everything is decided by committee anyway. Yeah. And to answer your last question from before, which was like, why are any of these people making content anyway when they want to go sell paper towels in space? It's like, it is about keeping consumers, particularly global consumers, in the ecosystem. So that when you do buy paper towels, you think of it while you're watching the Terminalist spinoff and maybe to mop up the arterial blood that's all around because you've been watching these shows. And so you make supplemental purchases once you're within it, and you stay on that capitalist team, basically, right? Like it just keeps you locked in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they want the same experience that people largely have with Netflix right now, which is that they associate Netflix with turning their television on.
Yeah.
And I think that is, you're trying to get to a place where that is essentially the association people have with your product. I guess it's troubling. It's also just, maybe it shouldn't be surprising at all that you could tell me that within 10 years, the three things on my Apple TV are going to be Apple, Netflix, and Amazon.
Yeah.
Because that's the only places that survived.
What about Angry Birds?
Trying to think of what else I have on my Apple TV that's pretty sick. YouTube.
I bet you don't have Crunchyroll.
I don't.
Well, come over sometime.
Let's talk about White Lotus. Let's actually get into some actual text reading.
I'm really excited to talk about this show.
I'm excited to hear from you. So you were like, I'm fired up. I really want to go off on this. So penultimate episode of this season. We have really finally our team of researchers got back to us finally, and they're like, sirs, it is an 8-episode season. I know that we've been like, this is 111? What is happening? And it was, I would say, if you took this episode and showed it to me at any time over the last 6 weeks, I would not be able to say that was definitely the penultimate episode of an HBO show. There was obviously an element of a denouement to the Rick storyline. But for the most part, I feel like this has been a very slow boil season. Partially, I feel like I'm saying that because we have some awareness of like a pretty big crime that is committed at the beginning of the season, which is teased. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe that has impacted some of how I've watched it, although you can start to see breadcrumbs leading to a couple of different places. Before we get into the actual ones and zeros here, what did you think of the episode?
I loved this episode. I loved it. I loved watching it. I've loved thinking about it since I watched it. I've rewatched parts of it, and it has continued my late season zag in thinking that this is shaping up to be a pretty excellent and I think underappreciated season of television. Now, I'm not trying to retcon my own reactions. Like, I thought the first episode was really fun, really engaging, excited to see these great new actors playing these broad characters, and just generally happy to be back in a White Lotus resort. Mm-hmm. I stand by my in the moment feelings that those middle episodes were sort of confusingly inert at times, and what I think what we reiterated a few times was that like none of the central conflicts seemed to be evolving in any way. They were sort of stuck there, and I feel like I've earned the right to say this again. I haven't said it in a while. That is a feature, not a bug, that I don't think I had appreciated about this season. All seasons of The White Lotus, and particularly all Mike White shows, are interested in Buddhism. We got dinged by some good faith listeners for not mentioning Enlightened when we were sort of saying something similar last week. Which, in my defense, I was not enlightened to Enlightened when it was on. That was right as Grantland was kicking off, I think, and it kind of fell into the Sons of Anarchy bucket. Shows could not be more different, but shows where I was like, oh, they're on, and I have all this other stuff to catch up on. But I bring that up just to say that like Buddhism is a constant in Mike White's work, and the realization in this episode, particularly, that Tim is stuck in, there's a Buddhist word for what he's stuck in, which is a bardo, right? It's the intermediate state between death and rebirth. There's a period of transition and potential for liberation.
I think I learned about that on Severance, yes.
This is also, on what's that now? I thought you were going to be like, oh, George Saunders' book, Lincoln and the Bardo. No, you're man of the people. Friends of Eddie Coyle over here. I get it. This is not a new concept for White Lotus either. I didn't remember this, but then in thinking about this and reading a little bit, I'd forgotten that when Sydney Sweeney's character shows up in the first season, she's wearing a sweatshirt that says Bardo University, which is not a misprint for Bard College. That was intentional. That I think that Mike White, and he's probably talked about this in interviews I haven't even seen or don't remember, but a resort is a liminal space in and of itself, and a vacation is a liminal space in your life. So for Tim to have absolute ruin at the other end of a telephone, at the other end of the flight home, and being perched in it and just stuck, truly stuck, unable to tell anyone, and unable to tell his son this episode, fantasizing about killing himself, about killing everyone. That is pretty profound existential stuff that does not track with any kind of normal expectation, particularly of a Sunday night HBO show, of week-to-week development and action. So I think, and I'll quit monologuing for a second, but like I do think that this was I think it was a beautiful episode. I think it was profound at times, and I think it was a really useful reminder that Mike White just fundamentally does not operate like most creators at his level. He got backdoored into this role by fixing it, by like putting a body in the beginning of it, and then Casey calling him and being like, can you save my Sunday night schedule during COVID? Like, he doesn't play by the rules that he is expected to. And even like a Craig Mazin, who we're going to be talking about soon with Last of Us, he's commercially minded in terms of how he builds the character and builds the episode act outs. And Mike White is just still kind of treating television writing the way some people treat like a worry stone, like a little thing in your pocket that you rub and you rub and you rub, and who knows if you ever get a breakthrough or not.
So you think of this show as more of an accidental blockbuster?
Yes, but I think I think it wears the clothes, and I do want to talk about the clothes because we should be doing a shirt ranking this season. The shirts are elite. Like, everyone was like, oh, Lachlan's shirt sold out the other week. Can we talk about Gary's shirt? Those rich oranges and browns and yellows, unbelievable. But yes, it has it has the brand tie-ins and the away luggage and the fantasy element and the sort of,
and fan casting it and, getting excited about where the next season is going to be, et cetera.
Totally. But like the contours of it kind of remind me in terms of development, like intentionally so, it reminds me of therapy more than it reminds me of a television show, in that these characters talk about their problems and are stuck in their problems, and maybe they learn to observe or note their problems, but do they change their behavior? Will they change before they go back to their lives? Probably not. And that might lead to feelings of dissatisfaction, I think, with what we're accustomed to getting from our television shows that don't usually just mirror the stubborn permanence of our actual lives.
Well, okay, so using the language of therapy, let's talk about a series of breakthroughs and false breakthroughs that happen on this episode. Obviously, the big one would be Rick finally getting his Inigo Montoya moment, seeing Scott Glenn, getting his confrontation with him, not quite getting maybe the emotional response that he wanted, but obviously getting to some point where he was like, violence is not the answer here. Vengeance in this way is not the answer. He does kick over Scott Glenn's character's chair, but that's the extent of the sort of muscle he uses. And then he and Frank, his compatriot played by Sam Rockwell, who might be stealing the season, run off into the Bangkok night and have a pretty normal Wednesday night.
In Bangkok.
In Bangkok. And, it all ends with this Coke binge party with a bunch of girls. And, at one point, Rick is offered a line and he just sort of is smiling at the camera. And I saw Walton Goggins was like, this whole season, I've just been getting my muscles ready for this smile.
Yeah.
About like finding peace with this character. And I thought that was interesting. I saw my colleague Andrew Grodadaro was like, I feel like I'm watching a different show. On Twitter, he said that about the Goggins quote. And I have a tendency almost, I tend to agree with Andrew, where I was like, oh, I didn't take completion from that moment. You know, I didn't take serenity from that moment. I think maybe he's in a serene place for now, but I think that there's a lot of Rick is going to be in the last episode of the show.
I'm just planting flags all over the place. I think Rick is dying in the finale, and I think his smile of enlightenment is why. I don't mean
because of what he did at that house.
Well, I do think it is odd that he said who he was. He didn't say his name, but he said who his mother was, so I imagine he is in some way traceable. And then they escape into the night, but he is still escaping back to the White Lotus Koh Samui, which is owned by Kun Jim, and Kun Jim's wife knows that he's staying there. So I do think that there may be some security muscle coming to extract him, to use a Russo brothers word. So but also I think, and I don't mean to say that I think that Mike White's view of enlightenment means instant death for those who actually achieve it. I do think that the smile was one of a letting go of self, a letting go of what he had defined the self, and of worldly, not needs, but like it's very interesting to watch the twin poles of Rick and Frank over these 3 episodes, where Frank's serenity and his self-awareness and his sobriety that turned into a meme, a Goggins meme that will outlive this show and probably certainly outlive Rick, was so easily flipped, right? And that this seems like a different level of sobriety, even if he's still drinking whiskey like it's water. I think that Goggins' performance is astonishing. And by the way, last night, I don't think you watched Gemstones right afterwards. I did. And it's the Shohei Ohtani of
he's pitching
Sunday night. Yeah. Because for people who just let White Lotus roll into Gemstones, this episode begins with Goggins' baby Billy character water skiing naked, just hanging and flapping in the wind. So it is really a journey with this actor. But I absolutely felt the intensity and the gravity of the character's baggage, and I did feel it physically lift from him. I mean, I think it was an incredibly grounded and like physicalized performance, and I thought that smile was, I found it really moving, and I found it really not just moving. Like I found that the collision with Kun Jim to be really significant and impactful, and I wonder if a large swath or just a notable percentage of Sunday night White Lotus viewers were like, that's it? He had a gun. What? That's all we're getting?
I wasn't like, that's it, he had a gun, because I wanted him to shoot him in the head. I think that Rick's been an interesting sort of, honestly, almost like the figurehead of the show this year for me. Like, regardless of how much fun I'm having with the Ratlifts and the girls trip, like, his story was very obscured for the first 4 or 5 episodes, although I think people were starting to put together like his obvious interest, his like the story about his father, et cetera. Like, you know, it was starting to become clear. And then because he is part of a plot line that we usually don't get in White Lotus, which is this outside kind of adventure outside of the walls of the resort, or even really adjacent to the resort, he sort of has become the kind of flagship character for me this season. And I love Goggins. And I think that these have been the most exciting sequences and scenes. And they're the moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can't feel anything beneath my feet. Like, what's happening now? What's going to happen next? Is Frank going to know any of her titles, or like, what, you know, what is going to happen?
That was really funny.
But I think that there's an element to which this season feels like there's less overlap in a real way of the different guests. And I don't know if I have the actual data to back that up. And so that these almost feel like a
Yeah.
collection of short stories that are happening at the same time rather than one story that involves 6 to 8 people. Obviously,
I think
if
that's
there's this
valid.
cathartic, violent event in the last episode that brings together everybody, I'll have that to contend with. But that, I think if I had to articulate the thing where I'm getting like a 33% charge after seeing certain storylines, it's because I don't feel like they are necessarily interlocking with other ones.
Let me do a very challenging judo podcast move, which is I want a yes and yes but. I think on an entertainment television level, it's an incredibly valid critique and something that sets the season apart from other seasons, and I think something we had talked about in past weeks as well. Has Belinda even laid eyes on the Radcliffes, or surprisingly, even like the girls' trip? Like they are in different shows, and I think that has decreased. There's a lot of missed opportunity for character interaction and energy trade-offs, that there otherwise could have been. Although, like the Radcliffes going to the Gary party, like there's some, but to your point,
Sure.
it is
Yeah.
definitely lacking this season. I think the argument to be made why that's intentional is because this whole season does seem to be more explicitly about the prison of the self. And so every one of these characters is just at sea in like a personal pain kayak and not really on a large party yacht. And that there's something to be said about, and that there's something that is attempting to be said about that circumstance within it that I find kind of interesting. Like, we won't spoil it, but I think it's relevant just to mention, like, we're going to talk about MobLand in a minute, in the first episode of MobLand. And in MobLand, there is a scene near the end of the episode when a character pulls a gun, surprisingly, on another character, and against all logic and against all laws of household maintenance, frankly, fires the gun in a very showy and dramatic way. And that is a scene that is crafted to maximize audiences gasping and entertainment and like, what the fuck, right? And going for the jugular in like a very, very intense way. White Lotus just seems much more concerned with emotions and feelings that are more relevant to our everyday lives and less easily translated into entertaining television, like contentment instead of happiness, or morality instead of enrichment. I mean, like the Belinda circumstance where Gary's like, I'll give you $100,000 and we'll both be at peace here. And Zion's like, take it. And I think that, on
he's also like, the alternative is that he's going to come after you.
Right. And on MobLand, you take it. But in White Lotus, like being hung up on that and being like, wait, this is actually a moment for me, an inflection point in my life about how I want to live, if it's worth living, if I make these choices. And it's going to play, I mean, we'll see what happens next week. There is gunfire. As we said, this is still an entertaining show, but it is it is holding space for some deep moral conviction, which I think is, again, kind of hard to communicate on TV and might not be to everyone's taste. And then I think also the brilliance of the show is some of that gets washed away in a tide of rosé.
I think intellectually and spiritually and emotionally and philosophically, I find the show incredibly stimulating still. Like, and I obviously like enjoy scene to scene. We're talking about critiquing like minor things on somebody who's already made the Final Four. Like, I'm not really trying to like say that like I'm out on White Lotus at all, as much as it's been an odd experience to have this show be, and it usually is, but I think the first season had much more broad comic elements.
Yep.
I think the second season had a real feeling of like kind of melancholy and ennui about being in this incredibly historically relevant, beautiful place and feeling so empty inside.
But there was also campiness and violence, and it had a whole other life.
And it had Coolidge. It had like 20% of any given episode was Coolidge making hay like out of any scene she was in. And I'm surprised to be here in season 3 saying like, oh, like I kind of do miss that aspect of the show because it wasn't always my favorite, maybe in the moment, I mean, I like Tanya a lot, but like I sometimes would find it a little bit like the juxtaposition of Tanya's experience and other characters' experience was a little harsh. But yeah, I'm not trying to say that like in any way like I'm let down by this season as much as I'm still sort of sorting out how I feel about it as like a season as a whole, even if I've enjoyed the episodes individually. We can talk about a couple of other plot lines here.
Yeah, I want to talk Ratliffs.
Yeah, let's talk about Piper because I thought that had a real beautiful ambiguity to it. I think everybody's got their various reads on it because of what Lachlan has experienced or conducted over the course of this season. Like anytime he's in bed with a sibling, you're gonna get we're gonna go to replay, if you know what I mean. And so Piper and Lachlan have gone to the monastery for the night. She's going to have this one experience that her mother wants her to have before she signs up for a year-long gap year living at this monastery. And Lachlan offers to come with her, and he seems to take to it more than she does, or rather, he wants to join her in this experience. And as soon as he expresses that, and it's a great scene, she's just like, yeah, no. Like she doesn't say that, but she's just like, okay, well, we'll talk about it in the morning. And is kind of like backs away from this guy, her brother, who she's basically needed as a security blanket this entire season. What did you make of that scene?
I think one of the more quietly radical things of the season is that it takes this concept of the fallacy of the self, which is baked into Buddhism and has been repeated in various iterations over the course of the season, and kind of extrapolates it to the Western mind and the Western construction of self. And that leads us all the way back to Therapy Island. And there's no greater driver of our sense of self or the prison of the self in our lives, in our society, than family. And our allegiances to family and our obligations to family and the modeling we get from families. And I think the creation of the Ratliffs as like a toxic silo and then dumping them in this place has been really fascinating. And it's led to some jokes and it's led to some memes and it's led to exactly what you're saying. It's sort of brilliantly and subversively being like, wait, are they going to give each other handies now? Like what's happening here? But in effect, what we're seeing is, Saxon's disillusionment is happening in real time in a pretty compelling way. But Piper being the only one who has been fairly clear about her desire, and her desire is to get the fuck away from them.
She's also the only one who stayed sober this entire time, pretty much.
And to remove herself from it. Now, is she free of the self or the construction of family? No, because she tricked her parents to coming with her to, in a sense, give her permission to do the thing that she, legally an adult, already wants to do. So she is trapped to a degree. But the saddest part of it, I guess, is, and it makes me worried about the finale as well, is the Lachlan part of it. And there's elements of Lachlan that I think have reminded me and other people of Fred Heckinger's character, who Sydney Sweeney, berates into a closet in season 1 and ends up kind of the only one who's free on permanent vacation rowing, right? And that's the best case scenario, I guess, for Lockie here. Because what we see in this isn't necessarily, and you can see it this way if you want, that he wants to do his siblings. It's that he is so empty, he has nothing else, and nothing else has been modeled for him. I think the scene when he wolfs down the food is important because he's just...
Yeah, he's like, I don't really have an opinion. I thought I didn't want this, but when you asked me to want it, I like inhaled it.
And I'm hungry. I'm just hungry for something. And what we're seeing over the course of these episodes is, Tim wants to kill his family to free himself or to free them from their shared obligation of pain. Lachlan, I guess, to a degree, Saxon wants to fuck their family. At least Piper's just like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And I feel like it's an interesting story vein to be exploring because, every time I open the New York Times, there's either an article about, a letter responding to, or a book review about a book being like, emancipate yourself from your parents. It's the only responsible thing to do. But I kind of love the artistic way in which the show isn't about that, but it's revealing itself to be about that dynamic. And then in terms of Parker Posey, I feel like we don't give. I'm definitely gassing up Mike White in this episode, and he doesn't need it. But there's an artistry to what he does that is often hidden in kind of directness. And I think building to a place where Parker Posey is at the party, and she's like, "Well, I can get you away from this man. You're only with him because he's rich." When we know she is foreshadowing her own circumstance. It's like having someone do a magic trick in front of you. Where like, okay, I know I'm at a magic show, but look, you did find my card. It was so beautifully revealed. And I also want to call out, I did rewatch this. When the woman says, "I love him," Parker Posey's face does no less than 16 distinct movements and flinches. Like it is, I can't imagine how much fun they had in the edit bay. Just freeze frame that scene. When she takes this news in, she takes it in her jaw, her lips, her nostrils, her eyes, her forehead. Elite face acting.
I liked the fact that all of those kids, well, actually, especially Saxon and Piper, are defining themselves very clearly at such a young age. Like Saxon's like, if I'm not successful in business, I literally have no other hobbies. I have nothing else, and Piper has sort of defined herself in opposition to her family, and she needs Lachlan as like some sort of comfort in this world, but like for the most part is like, I reject your materialism, I reject your Judeo-Christian Southern way of doing things and way of being. And the second anyone wants to join her on that journey, she's like, well, I don't want this. Like it's not necessarily Buddhism that she's attracted to, it's opposition.
It's a great observation, and as a great man, my old New York therapist used to say, love and hate are.
I regret not going to therapy for many reasons, but apparently understanding season 3 of White Lotus is number one.
I mean, it helps that love and hate are so deeply connected because they both bind you to someone. Like you can love someone or you can hate them, but either way, they're motivating your thoughts, and that is Piper's response here. I mean, she wants to get away, but she's eager to have her brother help her. They're sitting at the dinner table, and it doesn't actually say, I don't think, that they're under some sort of silence.
I don't think anybody's talking at dinner, so I think that's why they're probably just trying to observe the ritual. Yeah,
there's some sort of expectation, and so the person who's theoretically on a similar mission smiles at her, and she smiles back, but she's immediately then pulled back into, you're embarrassing me. What are you doing? Eat the food or whatever to her brother, which is how they probably have behaved at restaurants with their family for years. It pulls you back in
down there
in a comfortable way.
What do you think he was eating there?
I think it looked like a rice bowl, and I didn't really see the spice element.
What's the big deal? Yeah.
Do you think that there were some hidden chilies in there, or is just, or at that moment that the rice ball hit, did he remember what happened on the yacht again? Because those memories keep rolling.
Have you seen their speculation online that Lachlan, in fact, did not take MDMA that night? That he
palmed it or something? Yeah. I've not seen that particular speculation. Was that on Breitbart? Was that on...
It's on the MobLand Reddit.
Steve Bannon's War Room. How did you... Oh, last thing. Speaking of giving Mike White even more flowers, even though now he's covered in them, I have not been reading the online chatter, so I don't know if this was predicted weeks ago, but I genuinely was surprised that the Russian guys were behind the robbery in that moment.
Were?
I was. It never occurred to me. Wasn't thinking about it.
Newborn deer, aren't you?
I thought that was artfully revealed. Has that just been obvious to everyone?
The Russians committing crimes?
Hey, I just read the news, and apparently they're great. They're our friends now.
If I wind up getting pushed out a window before the next pod.
Yeah, but it's a window like Lori's window, which looks scary, but it's actually...
Right. There had been, I think that the Valentine thing had been kind of tipped a little bit beforehand. Yeah.
I like that reveal. I liked it landing on Guy Talk. Mook runs a tight ship. That was a tough talk from her.
Yeah.
About how violence. I mean, I must say though, Chris, I know you and I don't want to put you on blast here, but I do feel like if you were Guy Talk's age and you were single and in the market and a woman was just like, the thing you don't understand, Chris, is that violence and fighting are a natural part of life, I think you would propose before the dessert course came. I feel like that is an appealing feature for you.
Yeah, I feel bad for that kid. I don't think he's got the hand he needs to close that. It'll be. I have found the Guy Talk and Mook plot line to be a bit farther down the road than the rest of the stories. Do you feel like that you're painting a really interesting picture of this entire season and how all these things are speaking to one another? Do you see that with these two characters?
I mean, I know I care for them, and I'm not bullish on Guy Talk's future in any career, let alone being on Life. I would love to see that storyline turn into something other than what the default setting for local staff tends to be in White Lotus shows, which is they just get absolutely pancaked.
Railroaded. Yeah.
It seems like we're headed that way again. And it's not necessarily like that seems like a fairly accurate story beat to keep hitting, but I would like something slightly different if possible. But I definitely don't expect it. And then, yeah.
You want to talk, the girl strip is the only thing we haven't really hit.
Yeah.
Tough
talk at dinner. By the way, go to a different restaurant. That'll alleviate the mood.
Where would you go?
I don't know. Go down by the beach and have some seafood. Like when they open the menu, I'm like, what new surprises do you think will be awaiting you in there?
So is White Lotus all inclusive?
Wow. Great question. I don't know. Do you think they're just running a tab the whole time?
I think I would find young Andy hitting the hotel restaurant a couple of times.
It's not all inclusive. I'm sure it's not all inclusive. That's why else would they be upselling the bottles of rosé, you know?
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. So yeah, I thought that fight scene was dynamite. I love following Lori out into the night, going to the fights.
Bib, they're all so well cast. Bib was just eating in that scene, even when only Carrie Coon eats on screen.
I almost wish the fight had happened earlier in the season because I would have liked more stuff like that and more getting into the real history of these people rather than pretending to be such tight friends and kind of sniping a little bit behind each other's backs. But it was fantastic. And they're going to be the three that I think I remember the most from the season. I say that without having seen the final one. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I would say that also Therapy Brain would agree with Jacqueline's observations, but probably not best to deliver them like poison darts from a blowgun by your close friend. You know what I mean? Like we are all the architects of our own disappointment. And we do choose things that are bad, even if they're familiar, but you know, you're on holiday. I mean, chill out. Just order another mango and sticky rice.
This isn't even all inclusive, you know?
She's paying for it.
We still have to settle the Amex. Okay.
I did think the friction was really good. Do you want to take, do you want to talk at all about what we think might happen, what the obvious fault lines are?
I think your guess that Scott Glengang does not just chill in Bangkok after that incident is probably right on.
Yeah, because what's interesting, and there's so much, clearly I think so much is interesting, but Kun Jim is just like, I used to be the kind of person who would do anything, and then I realized I am not that person.
Oh, I have to ask you about this before we go. Did Greg never told Chloe that story?
I had no idea what to make of that.
I think the implication is Greg has basically indicated to Chloe, like, I'm going to kill this kid, but she's got to set up a pretense for it.
I don't know. I mean, again, this is when the show is at its best. It's just like everything happening in that scene is true, including that Amy Lou Wood is giving the facial reaction masterclass of the year. And I think she might have the best career arc coming out of the show than anyone else. But that like everything was true. They're like, don't kink shame. Also, you're not who you think you are. You're pretty fucked up too. Also, I'm just trying to help out this guy. Also, I love him. Also, you're expendable. Also, I'm using you. Also, he's really good in that amazing shirt, just sitting there and glowering. I think that my general feeling is I would be more surprised than not if Greg/Gary behaves like a murdering psychopath in the finale. I mean, he is.
I think that he actually is. I don't think he was necessarily lying to Belinda.
I don't think he was either.
That he likes Thailand. He wants to stay here.
He wants no part of any of this.
And he just, so him getting deeply involved in a bunch of people who are leaving the next day and starting a lot of problems for himself, I find to be hard to believe. But it's, you know, maybe I'm wrong. I thought Chloe setting up Gary as this, you know, sexually provocative, damaged man-child was not the vibe I was getting from Gary's previous interactions with Chloe. He just seemed like a jealous guy.
Yes, and he also didn't seem like someone who opens up, particularly about anything.
To Chloe, yes.
Chloe, and every episode is a day. So when did this great unburdening
Well, he says to her,
occur?
he was like, I want you to bring them here.
Yeah.
And he's basically like, and that's a condition of this little arrangement we have going
I mean, we
on.
could find out that, there's a bunch of bodies in the back of that house. Like that just could be what this is. I also think that the Greg Gary storyline ends this season, one way or another. So there is a version of this where Guy Talk proves himself to be a crazy dead-eye shot and capable of violence by shooting Gary and probably losing his job for it or whatever else may happen.
Fair amount of guns coming to the hotel because you've got the owner's bodyguards, Scott Glenn's bodyguards. There's the gun that Guy Talk has. I guess Rick got rid of his gun, but there
Russians.
could be the Russians have guns, presumably. Yeah.
And then there's the, what is Tim willing to do? What is he seems pretty into dying and not going home.
Tim should go, as soon as Tim gets his phone back, he should go live on X and appeal to President Trump for a pardon.
Oh my God, it would be so easy.
Yeah.
That's a really, really great point.
Do
you see
can we get into MobLand?
Your guy from OZ.com just got pardoned? Like, it's beyond parody at this point. It's incredible. Do you think I will ever get official clemency and forgiveness from my True Detective Season 1 takes? Do you think that
Not
there will
from
be
the
a
internet.
receptive?
No.
I think it's safe to say that some members of the Ratliff family will be staying in Thailand, at least one. But
Perhaps
might
forever.
not be the one that we think of. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm excited. I'm all in on this season now.
All right. We don't have to spend a ton of time talking about this right now, but I wanted to bring up MobLand, which was released, I think, compared to a lot of other shows, relatively under the radar, given the amount of star power that's involved with it. So this is a series that has had a fascinating development story, one of the more interesting ones to me in recent times. It comes to us via Ronan Bennett, who is the creator and writer of Top Boy, and is the first two episodes are directed by Guy.
Too. Didn't he do Day of the Jackal?
He did Jackal as well, yes. And the first two episodes are directed by Guy Ritchie. So that was one of the main reasons why I was interested in this. The other main reason is that it appeared, at least based on the commercials, and it was proven out in this episode, that Tom Hardy is like playing a normal person. Now, a very violent, very morally and dubious person.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the Tom Hardy, I'm Venom, I'm Al Capone, I'm using a voice and wearing a mask and obscuring myself. This is like closer to Tom Hardy in Inception than we've had in a really long time. It's more like Tom Hardy in Locke or something like that. And I think he's dazzling in this show. This show is weird. You can feel a lot of different impulses going on with it. So I wanted to talk to you about this mostly because of the development story and the fact that it feels very much like the globalization of the Taylor Sheridan project.
Yes.
It was originally supposed to be called The Donovans, and it was somehow going to be a spinoff of Ray Donovan in England. It then was called, I believe, The Fixer or The Associate or both at certain points. It obviously has become its own thing, and it's very consciously. It's from 101 Studios, which does all the Taylor Sheridan stuff. The title sequence looks exactly like Kingstown or Landman.
Your guy David Glasser is a EP on this
Glasser
as well.
is the producer. I think the casting director on this show, it works on a lot of the Taylor shows. So there's a real feel to that. And you can tell that they want to make this both a London underworld crime story and also a little bit of a succession-y crime family story, which is essentially how they do most of the Taylor Sheridan shows, where there's like a kind of, there's the war away and then there's the war at home stuff going on.
Yep.
The show stars aforementioned Hardy, Pierce Brosnan as the patriarch of a London crime family. Helen Mirren in her second Paramount Plus show co-stars as Maeve, Pierce Brosnan's wife. Paddy Considine, one of our favorite actors, plays Kevin, who is the oldest son in this family, or one of the sons of this family. Other notable people: Joanna Froggatt from Downton Abbey plays Tom Hardy's Harry character's wife. Who else? We
Janet
got
McTeer's coming.
Janet McTeer is coming. So a star-studded cast with incredible pedigree behind the camera with Guy Ritchie and Ronan Bennett. And Jez Butterworth wrote the first script with Ronan Bennett. And Jez Butterworth just got done doing The Agency. And then we get this show, which like has its moments, but feels like the 7th episode of the 3rd season of a show in some ways.
Yes and no. I'm curious about that take. I mean, I broadly speaking, I want to say that like a moment ago, we're like, well, Amazon only has this and they spend money on this. And what are they? Like, whether you like it or not, kudos to Paramount for having a plan and sticking to it.
Yes.
Like, this feels like a Paramount show, and I'm fascinated by how they make their books work if they do, because they throw so much money at talent to elevate extremely rote, often, material.
Yeah.
Now, your opinions may vary on Sheridan shows. You may like some more than others. You may not like them at all. I really ended up thinking The Agency was excellent, but there is a smeary sameness to a lot of this. It's not just Jez Butterworth writing on both of these shows with the same production team. It's that the British actor Alex Jennings shows up in the first episode of both MobLand and The Agency as someone who doesn't make it to the second episode. Like, it's they have something that is working for them, and that is no small thing in this moment. Now,
the version of this show that is Tom Hardy as Michael Clayton of the London Underworld is the show that I will watch for 15 years if they want to make it for me.
Agree.
Him getting phone calls while he's driving around London and being like, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. My son was out last night with somebody he shouldn't have been. We need you to set up this meeting. We need you to get my maid's mother into a senior citizen home. Like, I'm just along for the ride the entire time. I love that he is, along with Bill Simmons, still dedicated to the plugged-in headphones revolution.
Well, both are powerful men who walk through cities.
I think I found in this first episode the Brosnan Mirren side of things to be like a different show almost.
Yeah, and frankly, a pretty uninteresting and brutal one. Like, the best case scenario for something like this is a familiar milieu and like genre and material and vibe, and then it's elevated by the instrumentalists. And Tom Hardy is such a compelling actor, and he makes a million choices in every scene, and 900,000 of them are confounding and are opposite of what many actors would choose. He gets so quiet, and where most people would get big. He has such a mastery of like fine motor skills as an actor and a delicacy, even though he's kind of a big, or at least he plays, on screen, he comes across as a big guy. I'm with you. I love his performance, and I really think there's no harm, no foul in making a show like that. I think his choices are super bizarre, like over the last 10 years. Like, he hasn't really done much of anything other than Venom movies and playing around with Peaky Blinders. And then he did make Josh Trank's post-Fantastic Four COVID fiasco Capone. I guess he has young kids and he just likes staying at home, and I can relate to that.
He said that he was like, I'm old and I was tired of never being in the same place. So like, I think that
so that makes sense.
London is very, very good to some of these shows right now. Yeah.
I would like to be cast on one of these shows and just live in London as well. I think that sounds amazing. But
all right, Tom, what you're going to do today is you pull up in your Audi and you take out your phone.
Which
and then
phone?
We're done.
Which phone, mate? I've got 3. Yeah, I mean, that stuff's fine. Pierce Brosnan is doing, I don't know what he's doing, honestly. It's some really weird choices. He is an Irish actor. I guess he's doing an Irish accent, but it is sometimes veers into Eastern European
But he is
territory.
like the John Hamm of Landman of this show. He's mostly talking to Tom Hardy on the phone.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's going for it. And I don't know what, like, if I love like that vibe. And Mirren is just like pickled. She's just walking around with a martini and being like, you should fucking kill him.
Yeah, I mean, you're making it sound cooler than it is. Like, I think that I basically came out of this with two seemingly divergent opinions that maybe aren't actually in opposition. One of which is I was bummed out at the uninspired meanness of this show and of most shows now. And it is a little bit of a byproduct of Sheridan, but whether you like him or dislike him, Landman also spent 40% of its screen time about a mother and daughter bonding over getting their butts fit and taking elders to a strip club. Like,
sorry you don't care about fitness.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Like, there is not even the slightest twinkle or sparkle of wit or joy or humor in this. And I feel like the world is ugly enough. And for them to be doing this without wit or joy or, frankly, much inspiration, like it feels pretty familiar territory. And to see our great, Helen Mirren is one of our great actors. Pierce Brosnan is a treasure and is wonderful on screen. And I was reminded of a movie I love of his that is streaming on Peacock now called The Matador, which is like basically I just did Bond for 10 years. Now I'm going to have some fun, where he sort of subverts his own role, and he's so vibrant and charismatic and fun. And in this, he's an old guy who shoots his friends in the heart. And
I was wondering whether that side of things might be the more of the Guy Ritchie side, because that had a little bit of like a bad gentleman feel.
But Guy Ritchie's stuff is glib. Guy Ritchie's
I know,
stuff is
but
often...
when you get... that's where I wonder whether there was like not a behind the scenes tension or disagreement about how they were making this thing, but the stuff that's taking place in that big country manor and giving people shit about wearing my wellies and all that stuff, and people walking around drinking martinis all day long.
Yeah, that is Lord of the Manor Ritchie stuff.
Feels a little bit more like it's happening in The Gentleman, whereas the Tom Hardy show is him cruising all over London and getting into stuff. And that's... I think Guy Ritchie could make that show as well.
It's a
but
good
Ritchie
observation.
has certainly started to like indulge in the like lifestyle brand of his stuff a little bit more.
But it definitely feels like Guy Ritchie did not have final cut over this, or this was work for hire in a way maybe his stuff isn't usually.
I think he did the first two.
I'm not even defending him because I have issues with some of his stuff too, but like The Gentleman I really enjoyed because it was winking. Like at least it was having a bit of fun with what it was doing, and I appreciated
that. So gonzo too, yeah. It's so over the top.
And this is, maybe it's just finding its tone, but the oppositional things that I was talking about before is, one is I just thought it was kind of ugly and mean, but also I will be watching the second episode.
There you go.
Because Tom Hardy trying to maintain a fragile truce in a East London mob war is of interest to me. I did find myself, we can save the rest of our thoughts for watching a little bit more, but like we have seen there are so many London crime pilots that we've watched in the last 3 years, and like who are we to complain? I mean, it's genuinely what I want, sometimes more than I want breakfast, is London crime content. But I do think it would be simpler if they were just one shared London crime universe, so we didn't have to learn the new rules about who controls the fentanyl trade every time.
I was also kind of bummed out. I was like, God, you guys really do not want fentanyl.
No, exactly. Like, listen to us. But what if instead of, there's the other mob boss whose son goes missing?
Yeah.
Couldn't that have been Tracy Ullman from Black Doves? Like, and then we know chronologically where this is happening in London.
It would be helpful.
And we know
hopefully when the tech companies have completely brought all other studios to their knees, they can just flatten all this and we can have the Black Doves, MobLand shared universe.
No, you have the London crime Doomsday into the London crime Secret Wars. And then at the end of it, you just have the sacred timeline where we understand that the Metro Police are just uninterested in gun violence if it happens between certain hours in certain regions of town. And you understand that at any moment, Ben Whishaw might be drinking champagne in one corner of the building while Michael Fassbender rides his spy motorcycle.
That's right.
But is actually just a struggling author in the other part of London. Like, is it just me being old that I want that? I just think it would be simpler.
No, I think you're right. It's just a question of whether we call it MobLand or Gangs of London.
Well, I'll leave that to you.
Okay. Andy, it was great seeing you today. So on Thursday's show, we'll probably hit the studio.
Yep.
We will hit the penultimate episode of The Pit.
Oh, boy.
And maybe talk a little Top Chef, which we have not yet. But then again, like those guys have been stuck in the studio for a long time now.
Truly.
They're going to let those kids see Toronto or what?
I have some thoughts about how the Scheinhardt Wig Universal Company is spending its budgets and maybe how they've changed their budgets a little bit. But I was hoping that the Terlato family of wines could have kicked in enough for them to see daylight.
Well, Saratoga's having a big moment meme-wise right now. So maybe they've got a little bit, maybe their stock price went up.
And by the way, Dope Thief rolls on. And I do want to,
I want to keep talking about Dope
Maybe we
Thief.
won't get back to it till it's done, but I do want to talk about that too. Dare I say it, there's a little too much right now.
Andy, great seeing you. Thank you to Kaya for producing. We'll be back with you guys on Thursday.